And it's also very evident that this particular health care bill, despite all the promises to the contrary, will in fact mean that there will be more unborn children who will be subjected to having their lives ended in the hideous performance of an abortion than would have been. Now, I want to be very clear about what I'm about to say, because this is not a political issue for me. Some issues are political, and I will argue with you all day long, and, truthfully, we could end up never coming to terms, and there's nothing really on the line except somebody's political ideology. But I want to say something from the depths of my heart. And I've said it so many times that I want to say it with every bit of conviction within me. For me, the issue of the sanctity of every human life is not a political decision, nor a political issue. It is a moral issue, and it goes to the heart of who we are as a civilization and as a people. Now, I know that many of you are here because you are concerned about the financial implications and the fiscal responsibility that is being completely just shred by the people of Washington. But one of the reasons that for many of us, the issue of how health care begins to move us more to the place in which unwilling participants, taxpayers, are going to indirectly being responsible for the ending of the human life. Well, the reason that's so important is because some of us truly believe with all of our hearts that on this issue, our culture will rise or fall. And let me explain why. Any culture that believes that some lives are more valuable than others, that elevates some to a point of the right to live and others forfeited that right to live, has already decided that some people are worth more than others and some people are worth less than others. Our founders put it pretty clearly. They said, in these very powerful words, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And without life there is no liberty and there is no pursuit of happiness." But more importantly, the crux of that doctrine is in these words: all men are created equal. Now, our founders said it that way in 1776 when 56 incredibly brave men signed their signatures to that document that we now call the Declaration of Independence. It was a revolutionary statement, literally. And they understood that if this experiment in a new government didn't work out, it wasn't just high taxes they would pay. They would pay with their own blood and that of their children. They understood the stakes. They knew the consequences of failure. And they refused to accept that anything was worth more than their own liberty. Now, admittedly, they didn't get it quite right in application. It took a while before African Americans and women were fully vested with the same rights as were white men. But the principle was put in motion, that no person is worth more than another, and no person is worth less. And in 1776, that's a pretty radical statement, because it really said that your ancestry isn't what made you worth something. Not the amount of land you owned or your last name, not how much money you had or what your occupation was. It wasn't your IQ or your particular position in life. Your worth and your value as a human being came from the fact that you were a creation of the Almighty Creator God, and His insignia upon you was what gave you your value and your worth, and you were worth as much as anybody else. No one was worth more, and no one was worth less. No person had a reason to show themselves with a level of pride and arrogance and indifference toward others, because every single one of us looked at each other with a sense of equality of basic intrinsic worth and value. That, my dear friend, is the essence of the United States of America. And that is why some of us have been able to rise up above from the positions of poverty from which we started, because we knew that no matter where we started, that's not where we had to stop, because we had equal worth and value. No, we may not have had the ancestry. We may not have had the last name. We may not have had the bank accounts, may not have even had the IQ, but we had the opportunity because we lived in a land that believed that when God created us, He created us with equality. Now, that is the essence of why today that the issue of the sanctity of human life is for me a non-negotiable. And the reason I say that is because day that we believe that one person is worth less than another or more than another, just remember that once a generation tells the one coming up that there are lives that are not worth protecting, and we decide that a life can be interrupted and terminated because it represents an economic disruption or a social interference to the biological mother, follow the logic. If we tell the generation behind us that those are factors that make it possible to determine a life not worthy to be lived and not worth as much, then one day when that generation to whom we have taught that lesson becomes old enough to be our caretakers, and my generation is old, we have already told them that when we become an economic burden to them, when we become a social interference to them, that we have now already licensed them to take our lives and to end it. The government that believes that lives at the beginning are expendable is a government that one day will tell us that lives at the end are expendable, and we cannot go there as a country and be true to who we are, that all men are created equal. It simply cannot happen in the United States of America. I ask you today to take your energy and to take your commitment and to simply do more than get angry and to do more than make calls and email and write. All of that is important, and I think you ought to do it from now till Christmas morning. But here's what I ask of you. This means nothing if next November you forget. This means nothing if next November you forget. This means everything if from now until next November you let this Congress know that we know how to reach over and grab the handle on the ceramic bowl and push it and flush the whole thing out and fill it with fresh water. You let them know you will not forget. And when they see many of their friends this time next year packing boxes and putting their collectibles and all their memorabilia up for shipment back home, they will finally get the message. They work for us. We do not work for them. This is our government. It is our nation. It is our future. And folks, if we do not claim it, then God help us and God forgive us. Let's instead say, no matter what they try to do between now and next year, we will not forget. We will not forget, and we will flush them out and send them home. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be with you here in Omaha today. Thank you. Thank you. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce your congressman from the 2nd District here in Omaha, Congressman Lee Terry. Wow. Yes, it is historic and it is unprecedented, but it is history we do not need, and it is precedent that we do not want. It is historic and unprecedented that this is a secret bill that has not been subject to the normal processes of government, which means that the people at least know what is being voted upon. For them to sequester themselves into the chambers of Harry Reid and then to come out and announce what a wonderful pot of stew that they have concocted for us. It is an outrage and an insult to our intelligence to think that we are incapable of allowing somehow the process to have been opened up so that we could see it and determine for ourselves whether or not the 2,300 pages of porculus that they have put together is something that we find appetizing. And where is the President's promise that all of the discussion on health care, he didn't make it once, but he made it repeatedly, that all of these discussions would be on C-SPAN. Folks, the Secret Service and FBI couldn't have found out what was going on behind those closed doors. Elected members that you sent and you pay their salaries to oversee it were locked out because they weren't of the same political party and did not agree in advance of walking in the door to agree to something that they hadn't seen. Yes, that's historic, and it's unprecedented. It's historic and unprecedented when you make a political decision and you call it purely nothing more than a policy decision, which it is not. This is not a decision that is being made to affect the policy of health care. It is being made to energize the political base of one side, and yet, unfortunately, it appears that they have energized both bases, but all against them. It is historic and unprecedented that we are now bribing public officials openly. It used to at least be done in secret where our kids didn't see it. Now we openly bribe them with $300 million at a time and tell them, this is what your vote is worth. You know what really upsets me? It's not just that Ben Nelson got $300 million. My senator got 0 for Arkansas, folks. What a bargain she turned out to be. I'm being facetious. I don't want every senator to go forward and to see what they have to do to sell off their integrity. I don't want them to go up there and every one of them get something and then somehow go back and boast of, here's some money that I got for you. The last time we saw that kind of historic moment, it was 30 pieces of silver, and that didn't work out too well for us either. Let me also add, it is historic. It is historic and unprecedented for the passage of a bill that will adversely affect state budgets. And one of the things that has concerned me most about Ben Nelson and others who have served as governors is that they must have forgotten what it was like to govern a state. Because there's something unique about states that federal government officials seem to forget. They can continue to borrow money that they can't afford to pay back and spend money they don't have. But at the state, in every one of the states, you have to balance the budget. Now, the impact of this health care bill is going to affect not just Nebraska, but every single state in the union in hundreds of millions of dollars in increased obligations. Nobody seems to be wanting to talk about that. First of all, I don't think a lot of the national press in Washington understand it. They're incapable of fully recognizing that there is a relationship between state and federal governments of a fiscal nature that is huge. And when the federal government makes a decision like they're making in the realm of health care, there is a dramatic wave that begins to come from Washington, flows all the way across the states, and it will have a huge impact upon state budgets, including Nebraska's. I think what you'll find is that the $300 million that Senator Nelson got won't come close to accomplishing what it will cost you. And when your governor ends up in your legislature saying that we've run out of money at the state level, just remember, don't hold your local officials responsible for all of that, because a whole lot of it is what the folks in Washington did to you. Remind them who voted for what in Washington. If the congressman stood tall and firm, reward them with re-election. And if they didn't, bring them home and let them help pay for the mess they created. I think Harry Reid is misnamed. He goes by the moniker of Harry Reid. It should be Harry Houdini. Because here is a senator who believes that you can cut $500 billion out of the Medicare program while adding millions of new people to the rolls. That you can add 30 million more Americans to the health care coverage overall. And while you're cutting on one side and adding people in, that somehow you're going to be able to do that and reduce the deficit. Now, that is the equivalent, my friend, of having 10 kids around a table with a bowl of food and saying, you're going to cut the bowl in half and you're going to bring 10 more kids in to eat and everybody's going to get more food. Is there anybody here who believes that for a moment? Well, they believe it in Washington. And that's why they need to come home and sit around your table and get an earful from you and find out exactly how much you consider their historic and unprecedented ideas about changing health care and getting government more in control of your life. It's clear that there's going to be new taxes on the middle class and on small businesses, even though there were promises that that wouldn't happen. Thank you. Thank you very much. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This is why I love to come to Nebraska. I never get a welcome like that in Arkansas. I am so grateful. This is an amazing turnout of people in a very, very short period of time to come forth and to allow their voices to be heard from here all the way to a snow-packed Washington, D.C. And yet, I think all of us are wondering, are they listening to us up there? Are they even mindful of the fact that they work for us, not the other way around? I'm so very glad that Pete Ricketts came forward and was willing to be seen in public with me and actually introduced me. And I couldn't help but think how that vote would have been different had Pete Ricketts been elected to the U.S. Senate. I'm certainly not pretending to be here today as a fellow citizen of Nebraska, but I have been a colleague of the past three governors of your wonderful state. And I've enjoyed a relationship with all of them, including Ben Nelson. Mike Johans is a very close personal friend. He and his wife Stephanie and my wife Janet and I have been dear friends for a long time. And Governor Heineman and I also have been colleagues and friends. And I feel like that the cultures of Nebraska and Arkansas are very, very similar. And I know that you have had a profound disappointment in the vote that Senator Nelson announced yesterday. And I want you to know that I share the disappointment, but not just because it's a Nebraska vote, because it was not. That vote is reverberating all across America. And that vote will have an impact all across America. The question is not whether you can just reverse the vote. I don't give up in hope that it could be. After all, he reversed it once, he could reverse it again. In fact, maybe he would one day be able to give the speech, I voted against the bill before I voted for the bill, and then voted against it yet again. That would be a great opportunity to take it to a whole new level. But I came here today, and I just flew in from New York, and I wanted to be here because I think that this is a very pivotal moment in American history for this reason. For almost a year, this president and the Congress have continued to use two words over and over and over again. Here were the words: historic, unprecedented. Historic, unprecedented. It was either a historic mess they inherited or an unprecedented opportunity to change it. A historic opportunity to do something great and an unprecedented burst of genius to get it done. For 1 year, we have been constantly barraged with the words historic and unprecedented. And in many ways, I must concur that if, in fact, here, the week of Christmas, while Americans are trying to think about things other than what their politicians are doing to them, and trying to think about what the Lord did for them, if in the midst of that, if in the context, now, folks, I'm enjoying that a whole lot, but I don't want this speech to last an hour and a half. But if in the context of Christmas week, when all of us are trying to think about something other than politics, they're going to secretly meet, secretly devise not only a 2,000-page bill, but a 380-page amendment Christmas tree to add to it. And we're supposed to just sit back and sing Christmas carols and have a nice warm fireplace time with our families. We need to be very careful in saying that we do not appreciate the lump of coal that we find in our Christmas stocking this year, courtesy of this Congress. They may not feel it in the chilly confines of Washington, where snow fell in more ways than one yesterday, not only out of the sky, but emanating from the Senate chamber in record terms. But I'll tell you, I sense that something is going on in America, and that is that people are fired up like I've never seen them in my lifetime, and are deciding that if the members of this Congress will not pay attention to the people who elected them, who hired them, and who have the right to fire them, then the people of this country will next year remind them who they work for when they no longer get to work for them. That's what we must do. Just since yesterday afternoon on my own website, we asked people to start sending a petition to Senator Nelson to ask him to please reconsider his vote. We already have 25,000 people who have signed that petition in less than 18 hours. Now, I know that the members of the Congress and the President has continued to say that we needed a bipartisan consensus bill. Well, let me at least congratulate the President on one thing. We do have a consensus bill. Nobody likes it. I never thought I'd see the day when you had groups as diverse as the Right to Life and NARAL both agreeing that the bill stinks. When you have people from the business community as well as from the labor unions who agree that this bill is the wrong direction for America. Now, some would say, well, but that just shows that it must be the right thing to do. No, it shows that it is a boneheaded thing to do, and Americans from every part of the political spectrum need to stand up and say that this is historic and unprecedented, but in all the wrong ways. Because it's historic and unprecedented that government would require you to purchase something in order for you to fully exercise your basic rights as a citizen of this country. In the 1960s, we eliminated the poll tax on people, declaring it unconstitutional that people would have to pay in tribute to the government in order for the privilege of voting, which was a guaranteed constitutional right. Now for the constitutional right of breathing in, and I guess if cap and tax passes, we'll also be taxed for breathing out, since we will be emitting CO2. But now for the simple privilege of inhaling air into our lungs, we will be required of the government to purchase a product in the marketplace. Now just remember that if the government can tell you what you must purchase in the way of insurance, where does it stop? Will they tell you that it is in your best interest? And frankly, it would be to eat only whole grains. That's one thing for you to make that decision. It's another thing for the government to tell you that you have to, and that if you don't, they can fine you or put you in jail for it. And that's exactly what they say that they can do if you do not purchase the insurance. And by the way, it's not just having it, but if you don't have enough, they can fine you. If you have too much, they will tax you. Now think about the utter insanity of this. They're going to require you to have a policy that they have decided meets the parameters of the coverage that they have chosen for you. What happened to liberty in this country where we made our own choices and the government did not choose for us what is our minimum and what is our maximum?